We all love a good movie twist, but sometimes they don't always work, with some getting binned away during a movie's development before it reaches our waiting eyes. For whatever reason, there are a whole series of unexpected developments lurking in the recycle bin of some pretty big films, from game-changing showstoppers to fun little add-ons, all of which have been scrapped before we ever got to see them. I'm Ewan, this is Whatculture, and here are 10 shocking movie twists that nearly happened.
Want to stay safe online and save big? Get up to 76% off a 2-year NordVPN plan, plus 4 months free and up to a $50 Amazon gift card. Just scan the QR code or click the link in the description and it's all yours.
Number 10. Loki actually dies. Thor: The Dark World. When it comes to Loki, actually dying is always a twist. So much so that fans had an exceptionally hard time believing he dies at the beginning of Infinity War. And it was that same fan backlash that caused Marvel to bring him back in Thor: The Dark World. The Dark World sees the rise of the Dark Elves, a vengeful race of pointy-eared aliens who want to destroy the 9 realms. After initially siding with the baddies, Loki redeems himself with a late-in-the-day sacrifice, snuffing out his flame for good. Alas, Marvel viewers could not let him be. Test screening fans went ballistic when the credits rolled and the divine trickster was still in the ground, and the Marvel money men did a swift heel-face turn. Thus, an additional stinger was filmed to tack on to the end, in which, as we know, Loki is alive and well and living at large as the new king of Asgard. Number 9. Tommy Lee Jones is the big bad, The Fugitive. The 1990s saw Harrison Ford take up residence as an action thriller guy, and the peak of his accomplishments in this period has to be The Fugitive. In the film, Surgeon Dr. Richard Kimball, sorry, I will always do this every time this movie comes up, it's never not going to happen now, is forced to go on the run after being framed for the murder of his wife, pursued by Tommy Lee Jones's relentless US Marshal, Samuel Gerard. Also, Joey Pants is in here and he has a cool sweater. Ultimately, Gerard saves Kimball and Kimball saves Gerard, and both uncover a pharmaceutical conspiracy that caused one of Kimball's old colleagues to try and murder him. The layers of the film unfold cleverly and everything weaves together into a satisfying conclusion, but this was certainly not always the case. Originally, as per /film, Gerard was the villain of the piece, going after Kimball for convoluted reasons surrounding a failed surgery on the Marshal's wife, reasons that were, thankfully, slapped right out of the film in successive rewrites. Love The Fugitive, would have hated a straight-up evil Gerard. Number 8. Unkar Plutt takes us back to the original trilogy, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. When you ask folks who their favorite Star Wars character is, Simon Pegg's Unkar Plutt is probably not at the top of the pile, but still, there is a fun story behind his role in 2015's The Force Awakens. As we all know, Plutt departs the movie in the first act after Rey escapes to Finn and BB-8 on the Millennium Falcon. But in a scene conceived of by Pegg himself, Plutt suddenly appears at Maz Kanata's castle, confronts Rey, and fights Chewbacca. How? Well, he activated the tracker on the Millennium Falcon's hull that was put there by the Empire in the original Star Wars. While this would have been a fantastic surprise and a great callback to the original series, director J.J. Abrams felt there just wasn't enough time to do it. Number 7. Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan don't get together. When Harry Met Sally. Considered a rom-com classic, When Harry Met Sally covered a lot of ground without really having to do much, what with that whole film consisting of a series of pithy conversations between Billy Crystal's Harry and Meg Ryan's Sally. First meeting in university, our titular lovers share a ride to New York after graduation, in which they quickly discover a mutual dislike of the other, but also the seeds of a future relationship. The film ends with them uniting at a New Year's Eve party, where at the last second, Harry catches Sally on her way out and declares his undying love. But it wouldn't have been if legendary journalist and writer Nora Ephron got her way. Ephron's screenplay originally had the pair meeting up once again, years after Sally slipped away from the party and catching up a final time before parting ways forever. Director Rob Reiner, who had hit a bit of a rough patch in his own life, was initially all for this conclusion, but after meeting his now wife, photographer Michelle Singer, during shooting, he had a change of heart and made a few last-minute alterations. Number 6. Ash sleeps too long. Army of Darkness. The concluding chapter of Sam Raimi's magnificent Evil Dead trilogy, Army of Darkness, sees Ash, Bruce Campbell, unwittingly sent back to the Middle Ages to help the very old-timey Lord Arthur and Duke Henry fight off a legion of Deadites. All's well that ends well though, and our chisel-chinned hero whacks the baddies, gets the girl, and arrives back in the present in time for his next shift at the S-Mart department store. But happy endings weren't always on the agenda. Raimi's original vision, in a last-minute, audience-baiting twist, was to have the Chin overshoot his journey back to the present, winds up in a post-apocalyptic future where humanity has been wiped out, and go crazy, laughing maniacally into the credits. Needless to say, the studio didn't take to this version and ordered the filming of a more positive conclusion to the trilogy. Number 5. Harry is a different kind of tragic. Speed. While Speed may not have invented the Die Hard formula, it is nonetheless widely regarded as one of the best to put a twist on that premise. And it wouldn't be half of what it is without either the guy in the chair, Detective Harry Temple, played by Jeff Daniels, or the scenery-chewing villain Howard Payne, played by a brilliant Dennis Hopper, who loves nothing more than extortion and murder. It's a classic case of good versus evil, where the sides are drawn early and the audience knows who exactly to root for. However, before Hopper stepped into the breach, Jack Traven's in-film partner Harry was set to be the secret baddie, turning Traven's world on its head. Screenwriter Graham Yost revealed this tidbit to the Script Apart podcast, and revealed that he nixed the idea during production, rewriting Harry's parts and leaving it to script doctor Joss Whedon to kill him in the second act. Number 4. Scott ditches Ramona Flowers for Knives Chow. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. As discussed in a 2011 interview with Collider, the original ending for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World saw Scott and Ramona come to something of a silent agreement that Scott really belonged with Knives. Thus, in the twist of twists, Ramona walks off into the sunset, and Scott settles down with a girl he's ignored and emotionally abused and been really creepy to for the better part of a whole film. Thankfully, Brian Lee O'Malley, writer and artist of the original series, stepped in and made sure we got an ending that actually made sense. Also, justice for Knives. She deserved way better. Number 3. R.I.P. Rambo, First Blood. In stark contrast to the voluminous number of sequels that came after, First Blood is far from your typical 80s action movie. It's an action drama thriller with borderline horror elements, all about Vietnam veteran John Rambo returning home to a country that is all too willing to terrorize him after it had turned him into a living weapon and robbed him of all of his humanity. The end of the movie ultimately sees Rambo surrender to the authorities after waging a one-man war in the jungle, reckoning with the trauma of the war and allowing himself to be taken into federal custody. Not the happiest ending, but also not the worst. Based on David Morrell's 1972 action thriller novel of the same name, the film originally matched Rambo's fate to his literary counterpart, killing the character off rather than allowing him to become a sequel-spawning behemoth. Alas, having already worked the kinks out of the character during production in order to make him more sympathetic and audience-friendly, Stallone became quite attached to Rambo. Despite filming the suicide scene in question, Stallone and director Whatculture felt this was a grim twist to many, and the rest is history. Although, as Quentin Tarantino argued in Cinema Speculation, this does somewhat dilute the themes of the book and make for a less impactful conclusion. Number 2. Jill survives to kill another day. Scream 4. The new crew of Scream 4 was headed by Jill Roberts, played by Emma Roberts, cousin of the Scream series' original final girl, Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell, and they have to face their own new Ghostface. The killer's reappearance brings back the original gang, and together with the teens, they set out to unmask the new knife jockey and prevent them from dicing up the class of 2011. Except Jill is the bad guy, and her desperation for internet fame makes her stop at nothing short of the business end of Dewey's gun, wielded by Sydney in the hospital room they're sharing. But the original script had Jill survive to the end of the film, concluding a few scenes earlier as she is wheeled off to a hospital and Sydney's body is found still alive, marking a significant first for the franchise. Scream 4 was meant to kick off a new trilogy. However, the film's failure to perform and its distinctive lack of cliffhanger material reburied the franchise for a whole other decade. And number 1, Dante is gunned down in cold blood. Clerks. Cooked up on a paper-thin budget by Kevin Smith, Clerks is the quintessential 90s slacker comedy, depicting a life in the day of two store clerks, Dante and Randall, and turning all the mundanities of minimum wage working life into fun, snappy little vignettes. Far from a flash in the pan, Clerks created a pair of cultural icons. No, not Dante and Randall, but Jay and Silent Bob, and the film acted as the cornerstone of Smith's View Askewniverse, a series of films with interwoven and recurring characters, primarily taking place in New Jersey. But it all started here on a normal day, which begins and ends like any other, with the opening and closing of the Quick Stop corner store. Nonetheless, when making Clerks, Smith didn't have such grand plans for a whole universe and just wanted to make a film that stuck. And like any creative in their early days, he struggled with the ending, and so opted for a rather grim turn. Smith's original closer had a petty thief rob the store and murder Dante in cold blood. It would have put paid to the View Askewniverse before it even got started.